Hi there. Welcome to Studio Movie Recap. Today we going to recap mystery thriller film, Get Out. The movie begins with Andre, a young black man, is seen walking by himself at night through a beautiful suburban street. When he approaches, a small sports car pulls up and begins to follow him. He quickly turns around to return the way he came. He noticed that the car is still parked where it was, but now the door was open. He was knocked out by a stranger and dragged to the sport car. The movie then shows Rose, Chris' girlfriend. She surprises Chris with visit. As Chris prepares to go to visit his girlfriend's parents during weekend away, he raises his worries that her family is not aware that their daughter is dating black man. She reassures him that despite the likelihood that they would say some foolish things, they are good people. She admits that Chris is the only black man she has ever dated, but she is sure that her parents will be entirely understanding. On their way to her parents' house, Chris asks for a cigarette, but Rose takes it and throws it out the window, telling Chris that her parents would be furious that she is dating a smoker. Rod, a TSA employee at the nearby airport, receives a call from Chris reminding him that he won't be able to work that weekend since he will be on weekend away with his girlfriend. Rod criticized Chris for dating a white woman and warned him that going to visit her home is a terrible idea. Chris didn't understand what he meant, so he dropped the call. A deer darts out in front of the car and is hit while they are talking loudly and not totally paying attention to the road. When they call the police and stop to investigate, they are questioned about their whereabouts by the officers. Rose explains to them that they are visiting her family. The policeman also wanted Chris' identification, but Rose was very defensive of her man. She intervenes and argues that since Chris wasn't driving, there is no need for his identification. Chris was very impressed with how she defended him and expressed his love for her, after standing up for him against the racist policeman. They arrived at Rose's parents' house. They were very happy to see their daughter with her new boyfriend Chris and welcomed them. Rose's father Dean Armitage was a neurosurgeon father and her mother Missy practices hypnosis in a curiously cold manner. Chris is given a tour of the home by Dean, who also shows him old family photographs. Rose's family had two black employees working for them, the housekeeper Georgina and groundskeeper Walter. They were hired to care for his parents. He admits that he would feel horrible firing them. He makes silly joke that it looks bad for two wealthy white people to have two black workers. In the afternoon, the family gathers for tea. Missy stirs her tea and makes 3 light taps with her spoon against the teacup. Then she asks Chris about his parents. Chris alleges that his mother passed away after being struck by a car when he was 11 and that his father abandoned the family when he was a small child. While pouring tea, Georgina, the housekeeper, accidentally spills the tea and Missy orders her to go lie down and recover. Jeremy, Rose's brother who is also surgeon like his father, shows up. At dinner that night, they were having fun and trying to know each other better. Jeremy begins to talk about combat fighting with Chris, claiming that given his African nation as a warrior, Chris would be a natural at it. He wanted to spar him, but Chris refuses. He had rules against play fighting with drunk individuals. Jeremy was angry and he went to sleep. Later, Chris was having hard time to fall asleep, so he decides to sneak outside for a cigarette in the middle of the night. While outside, he notices something approaching him from a distance. It was Walter the groundskeeper. He approaches Chris running like a maniac, then abruptly turns around and flees in a different direction. Georgina is looking out a window within the home. She looked weird. She was looking at her own reflection, not aware that Chris was outside. Chris makes the decision to go back inside. While he's doing so, he is frightened by Missy. She asks him to sit with her for a while. She uses her teaspoon as a focus item while she slowly hypnotizes him. She again asks him about his mother. Chris couldn't control his body and mind. Even though he didn't feel like saying anything, he told her everything she was asking him. He was engaging in the same behavior by pressing his nails into the chair's arms and crying. She again taps her teacup with her spoon 3 times and tells him to sink. 11-year-old Chris sinks into his bed, while present-day Chris sinks into darkness, seeing himself and Missy far above. His consciousness has left his body, which made him paralyzed in the chair. That time he lost the ability to control his body. The next thing he woke up, breathing heavily. It felt like it was just a nightmare, and nothing happened. He checks his phone as soon as he gets out of bed. He received a photo of Rod acting like he was giving his dog alcohol. He plugs it in since his battery is low. He decided to walk around and take pictures. He saw Walter and went to him trying to introduce himself and know him better since he didn't have that opportunity before. Walter acts weird, like he's a psychopath, and was doing all the kind of behaviors that mentally sick people do. Chris was very uncomfortable and decided to leave. The next day, Rose's family friends showed up for the big event. Rose introduced him to everyone. Many elderly white people were making improper comments to Chris, saying things like, "He has a good build, black guys are better in bed, and they wish there were more black men like him." Chris thought he was the only black man who attended until he saw another black man. He was around Chris's age, and Chris went up to connect with him, but just like Walter and Georgina, he is unnatural and looks like he's possessed. Those with good eyes will recognize that Andre is that man that was kidnapped from first scene. Chris started to be concerned because all black people who were there were not normal. He felt uncomfortable. He left the party. After he went upstairs, everyone who attended the party stopped what they were doing and looked up. When he got to his room, he noticed that his cell phone was pulled out of the charger and the battery was dead. He connects it, makes contact with Rod to inform him of the situation. Rod cautions him to leave the house, but Chris didn't listen to him. Chris tells Rod about the black man who attended the party and how familiar he looked. And Rod instructed him to snap a photo of the black man so that he may check his memory. After the call, Georgina blocks Chris from leaving and apologizes for unplugging his cell phone. She explained to him that she lifted it up when dusting the nightstand and forgot to plug it back. He told her that everything is okay and that he didn't intend to report her. She starts to get emotional and acting weird again, crying. Then she left. Chris returns to the party. He used his cell phone to sneakily take a picture of the recognizable black man so he can show his friend Rod, but he forgot to turn off the flash. The moment the phone flashes, the man adjusts. He transitions from being too proper to savage. He yells at Chris to get out. As his nose begins to bleed. He wanted to strangle him, but other people stopped him. Rose was now also terrified. She asks her father what occurred, and he replies that the man had a seizure as a result of the flash. The man emerges, apologizes for upsetting everyone, and states that he needs to go home. Chris informs Rose as they go out for a stroll that he is positive he recognized the man and that something odd is unquestionably happening. He tells her that he wants to leave right away and go home. Rose agrees and promises to invent a story to tell her parents. Everyone else leaves and returns home. As Chris begins to pack his belongings, after he sent Rod the picture of that man he took earlier, Rod calls him to inform him that the man in the image is a man they know by the name of Dre, who used to work at a theater but recently vanished. The phone's battery runs out. Chris sees the open closet door. When he looks inside, he discovers a box containing pictures of Rose kissing numerous other black men, including photos of her with both Walter and Georgina. Apparently, Chris isn't the first black guy Rose has been with after all. Rose lied to him. After Rose gets back, Chris informs her that he wants the keys to load his stuff in the car. Rose pretends like she's looking for the keys. Chris was so impatient, so he told her that he will meet her outside. Jeremy arrives out of nowhere, blocking the entrance. Missy and Dean are also present. When Missy and Dean tell Jeremy to calm down, Jeremy is trying to knock him out with a bat. Rose keeps on pretending like she's looking for car keys when Chris shouts her to hand over the keys. Missy and Dean tell Chris that they do not want him to leave. Rose finally showed her true colors and told Chris that she won't give him the keys. He finally understands Rose is also involved in whatever that was happening there. Chris was trapped in that house. He decided to try fight Jeremy. But Missy clinks the teaspoon on her glass, causing Chris to get paralyzed, unable to move. Rod tries to call Chris repeatedly, but the call always goes to voicemail. He goes to the police after researching the man in the photo and discovering that he has been missing for some time. He claims in front of a female officer that his son was abducted by white people to serve as a sex slave, just like the man missing in the photo. The police officers start laughing after he's done explaining. He was not taken seriously by anyone. When Chris wakes up, he is restrained to a chair in front of an old TV and a mounted deer head. He views a video that Dean's father created in which he discusses immortality and other topics. Chris notices that the padding on the chair arm has been exposed after his fingernails tore through the leather. On the screen once more are the teacup and spoon that makes him weak and paralyzed. Dean was preparing surgery. He removed brain tissue from a dead man, who appeared to be his father, and preparing to revive him using Chris's brain. They were in the home's basement when Jeremy entered the room and discovered Chris unconscious. He removes his cuffs and prepares an IV. Chris hits Jeremy's head hard with hard ball until he's dead. He had placed chair padding over his ears earlier to block the sound of the teaspoon, so he wasn't really unconscious after all. Since Jeremy wasn't coming back, Dean started to get concerned and left the lab area to look for him. Chris appeared and stabbed him with the horns of the deer, making sure that he's dying. Rose is unaware of anything because she has her headphones in. She is searching for pictures of her next victim that is muscular and attractive black men while listening to music. Chris tried to run away but found Missy in one of the rooms. He ran to the cup and broke it, preventing Missy from using it against him. She used a knife to stab him. However, he turns the knife against her, killing her instantly. Chris tries to leave the house through the front door once more, but Jeremy appeared and chokes him. Chris tries to pull open the front door twice, but Jeremy shuts it both times. On the third attempt, Chris stabs Jeremy in the thigh and brutally head stomps him, breaking his skull as he kicks the door. Rose heard this over the headphones. He dashes outside and enters Jeremy's vehicle. He called the police, telling them about his whereabouts. He accidentally hits Georgina. He couldn't leave her there dying like he did to his mom, so he gets her in the car and continues down the driveway. In the process, her wig falls off and she has a scar across her head. She starts to attack him. They crash into a tree and she dies on the spot. Rose chases Chris, trying to kill him with a gun. She called out the groundskeeper and told him to catch him. He chased him and tackled him to the ground, trying to crack his skull. Chris snaps a photo of him to distract him. He stopped and turned around and requests Rose's weapon to shoot Chris. After Rose gave him the gun, he used it to shoot her instead on the stomach. Then he shot himself. Rose is left bleeding to death on the ground. Chris bats away her attempt to grab the gun. Rose places a hand on Chris's cheek and tells him that she still loves him. Chris begins to choke her but stops himself because he's unable to kill her. A police car approaches. Rose makes a faint appeal for assistance, knowing that Chris would be arrested by the local police. However, Rod is the one getting out of the police car. Chris enters the vehicle. Rod remarks Chris, telling him that he told him not to visit that house. As Rod and Chris leave in their car, Rose smiles as she takes her final breath.